Well, welcome everyone to another education session from Fortra, formerly Help Systems. As you probably are aware by now, we had a name change about 2.5 years ago. That's really what it was, is a name change. And a reflection of the fact that as a company, we've grown quite a bit. We've done now 45 acquisitions. We just finished one up in May. Yeah, isn't that crazy? So talk about consolidating CRMs and all those kinds of things. We've gone through all those things too. So, but out of it comes a even better, stronger company called Fortra. We do specialize in cybersecurity, on and off IBMI, and then of course automation, certainly on IBMI. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. It's not meant to be a marketing event, but one of the things that's important to Fortra is for you as customers is to remind you we do like to provide education, and the education doesn't always have to be about something we actually do. Fortra does not help you upgrade your IBMI server, but we do help you bring education, like from great people like Pete here, to provide education around IBMI. So I'm Tom Huntington. I'm our EVP of Technical Solutions, been a longtime employee. This month marks my 37th year with Help Systems Fortra, and even prior to that, I was a customer of what was Help 38 before we came over to the ES400. So long career in this mid-range space. Today, I work as a solution engineer and work with a lot of large customers, large partners, and just really anybody who wants to talk IBMI, I'm willing to listen. And of course, I do talk everything else that we do. And then I'm joined with Pete Massiello. And Pete is not only an IBM champion in 2025, you got the distinguished award of lifetime champion, Pete. So welcome. Yeah. What are you up to these days?
Well, like we said before, I do about 2 days work a month, which is kind of perfect, and spend the rest of it traveling. We're exploring the world, and while I'm exploring, sometimes I get to see customers, friends. So life is great.
Good for you. You've been an icon in the space, and you've helped so many customers over the years learn about IBMI and the operating system and how to be a good admin and all those things. One of the things that I've done in the marketplace on behalf of Fortra for years is the IBMI Marketplace Survey. Believe it or not, this is the 12th year's result. Wow. I was just talking yesterday with somebody that we are going to start organizing year 13, so there will be a year 13. I'm not superstitious. I got married on the 13th, and I parked my boat at boat slip number 13. So I think I'm okay there. But anyways, there will be a year 13. But the important thing to see from the survey from last year is one of your top concerns were IBMI skills. And we feel that's very important here at Fortra. We'll continue to bring education sessions in things like upgrading your IBMI server like we're doing today, and other topics like cybersecurity, automation, monitoring, just a variety of things to help you out. So just again, our commitment to IBMI, we are square in it. We have a very large team of developers, support people, service people, salespeople, and all the things that you need to put together a great software company. And we also have long-standing relationship with IBM, and today we have the partnership products that we work on with PowerHA, BRMS, and RDI. So hopefully you're seeing great things in those products. We'll continue to invest in IBMI above and beyond, of course, the year 2025. So one of the things I also want to remind you of is we're talking about IBM 7.6, April 18th that happened. We had over 120 products that our support, services, and development team had to go through and make sure that they're ready to go. There's a blog out there. We do have one exception product. I know it's a very popular product on IBMI. It's called Go Anywhere. It's because of Java levels. We are working through that to support the latest Java levels so that you can go to 7.6 if you're Go Anywhere customers, but you're probably going to have to wait until end of third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter of this year, 2025. But that is important to us. We're working on that. We'll get you there. Now, we always like to start with a polling question, and our first polling question today, then I'll turn it over to Pete, is what is your current primary OS level that you have today. So you should see this polling question up in front of you. Notice, Pete, I don't even have 6.1 or something like that on here anymore, or even
Right.
7.1s, I guess lower than 7.2. So, but occasionally I still run into people with 5.4 and other releases out there.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I get a call from somebody on 4.5 not too long ago. 4.5. I don't even know what date that came out. I mean, that was probably 1990. I don't know.
Yeah, and you can't go by threes because back then it was like every 18 months IBM was coming out with new OS levels before they started doing the TR levels that they do today. So
Yeah, I got a chart. We'll actually look at when 4.5 came out.
all right,
I'm thinking
I'm
it's
waiting for the math.
2002.
I'm waiting to hear about that. So again, 7.6 just shipped here in April. Something else on the horizon, Pete and I were talking about during the lobby is we do expect Power 11 sometime, not very far out, I don't think anymore, to be coming. Just to remind you there, Fortra also helps people size and do capacity as you upgrade your servers. We're still doing that as a service, and we work with a lot of the channel partners on that. All right, that's enough time for this polling question. I'm going to close it out, and I should be able to share the results, Pete, and then we'll turn it over to you. Okay, well, it looks like we have a lot of very current customers with us today. 4% only on 7.3, 62% is kind of what I expect on 7.4, and 35% on 7.5. So this should be a really good session for the group. I'm going to hide the polling question, and Pete, I guess you can start sharing, and I'm going to turn my video off because they don't need to see my gray hair anymore.
All right, I'm going to share my screen, and I
Okay.
want to go to clean monitor 1.
Yep.
And you should see.
There you go.
There you go. Perfect.
Awesome.
All right. So thank you, Tom. And we're going to talk about upgrading to 7.5 and 7.6. And, it was great that we had the polling question because it gives me an indication of where everybody is. And it's great to see everybody up at 7.4, 7.5. Certainly, you don't want to be lagging behind, whether it be security, whether it be functionality, whether it be what's going to run on the next version. Of machines as well. So, and we'll cover all that in the session. So we're going to really start with what's a successful upgrade. A successful upgrade, in my opinion, is nobody knows you worked and did the upgrade. There was some downtime. Everybody comes back in and they're able to do their job. That's a successful upgrade because we don't want an unsuccessful upgrade. And the way we're going to make sure our upgrade is successful is planning. Planning, planning, planning. That is the key to any upgrade. I don't care what release you're going to. If you do the planning, you will have a successful upgrade. So with that, we're going to go through. If you have any questions, you can throw them into the chat as we're going through. This is what our agenda will look like, and we'll cover all these things. And we'll start with our map, right? So we did the poll, and if we're going to go from Portland to Chicago, what direction do we go in, right? If we're coming from 7.3, if we're coming 7.4, we need to understand where we are. So if we were doing a road trip, we would certainly have that map for us and know what direction we're going in. Just get my charts here. Okay, so it's a trick question because we could be coming from. Hopefully, you guys see my mouse as the pointer.
We are seeing your mouse. And Pete, perfect. I'm going to just jump in and remind people that this is an hour and 15-minute webinar, so don't leave us at the top of the hour. I sent that in the chat also.
Good point. So whether we're coming from Portland, Maine, or Portland, Oregon, we're going to come in two different directions to Chicago. And while an upgrade's not really that different from 180, right, coming from the west or coming from the east, there are slight differences that we need to account for. So we'll talk real quick about the IBM roadmap. We know 7.6 is the current version. We know that we really have support for iNext. Right now, they're staying out into, that looks like 2040 to me. So I always say, tell me one other system that has support going out to 2040, and I'll wait, because I know there's no answer to that. And yet everybody says, oh, IBMI, it's legacy. That's a crock of you know what. It's not legacy. You know the real definition of legacy means? It means it works, it's dependable, and that's where IBMI is. So as we talk about the release, we can see there's a great future with IBM Next, IBM Next Plus One, and I've been working with IBM on requirements for these two releases and what's going inside of them. So I know they're real, and there's some pretty cool things coming out. And same thing with the new things that came out in 7.6. Here's the IBM roadmap and strategy. Similar thing, we're going to see continued TRs coming out with 7.5 and 7.6. We won't see any more new TRs for 7.4. That's going to kind of slide off the table. So let's talk about the upgrade itself. This is really where we're going to concentrate on. We're going to concentrate on the planning. This is a roadmap of what we have to do. We're going to really stay on the pre-installation activities because that's what's going to make the difference. Now, there is a little utility called the IBM Pre-Upgrade Verification Tool, PRU, right? Great tool. But do I use it? Absolutely every time. But I don't want you just to use that tool and not understand what you're doing behind the scenes. So we're going to go through all the steps. Does PRU tell you everything? No, it does not. It does not. So you need to be aware of other things that go out there. And that's what this session's about. I've done probably 3,000 upgrades, and I really can't even count anymore how many I've done. And I've taken all those upgrades and consolidated it into the presentation. So that's what we're going to see today. So where do we start? Well, we need to order the new release. Now, it used to be you'd call IBM up and they'd, for those, and I recognize some of the names on this webinar, I know you've been around for a while, as long as I have. We used to get a pallet of books and a box with Mulek tapes in it and other tapes. And this is the new IBM. You now get nothing. You got to go out and get it yourself. So you're going to download that software. You're going to go to the ESS website. You're going to download it. Yes, you can order it from IBM. There's a charge for it. Why pay for it? Just download it. And we'll actually go through the whole process of where you download the software. You used to get license keys. You don't get those. So we'll go through that process. You used to get the manuals. You don't get those anymore. You used to get your PTFs delivered with the upgrade. You don't get that. And that's probably a good thing, because sometimes I see people say, well, I'm going to do this upgrade, and let's pick, we're going to do it between Christmas and New Year's because the plant shut down during that time. That's great, right? But I wouldn't want to order the PTFs now, because by the time 6 months comes or 7 months from now, they're going to be new PTFs. There's going to be a new technology refresh. We'd want to get those more closely aligned to when we're going to or would do the upgrade. In fact, we wouldn't even want to order the software now. But planning for it is okay. But let's run through some things and we'll get a better idea for it. Now, we're going to make sure we have backup media for a before upgrade and a before upgrade backup and an after upgrade backup. We're also going to want to say, how long are we going to be down? Because we're going to have to tell the users. I always say 6 hours, but quite honestly, I like to aim high and deliver below that. I could tell you my fastest upgrade I've done was 1 hour and 50 minutes from soup to nuts. And that was from the time they finished the backup. They gave me the system, 1 hour and 50 minutes. I had the PTFs installed. I mean, the OS was upgraded, the PTFs were installed, and I did a save sys, basically a save 22 after the upgrade. That's how quick. And I'm going to show you how you can cut that time down. Now, if we do the planning, we're not going to need the optional bottle of Tums. We're not going to have that. So Where do we start? Well, you want to get this book, and you can just Google search these numbers at the top of the screen. This is the IBM installation guide. This is going to tell you all the steps you need to do the upgrade. It doesn't tell you what's changed. It tells you how to do the upgrade. Now, those persons who are doing this, if you have multiple partitions, you may want to print out a chart for each partition, or certainly pull the checklist out of this and then check it off for each partition. I've seen people do multiple colors for multiple partitions. Yeah, that kind of works. I think it gets too confusing if you have more than 2 or 3 partitions. I like to just print out the checklist, and then I have one for each, and then I'll go back and refer, because the checklist is an overall checklist, and then we go into the book to look at things so you can check things off once they're complete. The next book we're going to want is the memo to users, and you're going to get that memo to users. There's the URL at the top of the screen. This is the memo to users to 7.6. Now, if I'm on 7.4, and a lot of you were, and you're going to 7.6, you need to get the memo to users for 7.5 and 7.6, because this book pertains just to what's changed in 7.6. So the book almost assumes you're on 7.5. So you can go from 7.4 to 7.6, but you'd need to read both of these books. The first book, the installation guide, you only need to read the 7.6 book. So this is an example of what's in it. For instance, if you have a device type D910, which would be a Dell disk or EMC storage, it's no longer supported at 7.6. You have to get a special driver to be able to do that. You're going to need to make sure that's checked off before you do your upgrade. Otherwise, you won't be able to get to the disks afterwards, and that would be a disaster. This is why I say planning is the key. 7.6 doesn't support Power 9 systems. We'll go through all this in detail, but this is what I read in the memo to users. In fact, I think that anybody in IT should be reading this book. I would give it to the programmers, the operators as well, because they may find things about RPG changes or SQL changes that the programmers need to be aware of. Maybe there's a new keyword, and that was a field name in one of their files. It won't compile after the upgrade. So things that you want to make sure you look at. Now, the next thing that we want to see is we go to our DR book, and in our disaster recovery book, we should have a list of all our vendor products. So you're going to see Fortra, you're going to see Help Systems Robot, and it's going to be what release are you on. Now, what I like to do is I like to call Fortra, and I'll say, hey, I'm running 7.4, I'm on Robot Console version X.Y, I'm on Robot Scheduler X.Y as well. Is it compatible with 7.6? They're either going to say, yes, it is, or no, it's not compatible unless you have these PTFs on the product, or you have to upgrade the product to a different version. But you want to find this out ahead of time so you can take care of all these dependencies and get them done before. So this is a very important step. It looks like just like a blank slide, but this would have all your vendor information on it, and this should be in your disaster recovery book. You know, the book that sits in the computer room with all the dust on it that nobody ever opens. It's that book. And you just want to go in and call each and every vendor, because the more we check off ahead of time, the better our upgrade's going to be. So let's kind of get back. Let's get back to release mapping and planning. This is important. If we're going to do the upgrade, we want to get the latest planning or preventive service and planning guides, the PSP. All you want to do is you could do a Google search on this. You could just do a send PTF order. It's SF98 and version release modification, VRM. So if I'm going for 7.6, it's SF98760. Download it, read it. It'll tell you a host of information about maybe defective PTFs, maybe PTFs you need before the upgrade. All that will be in this guide. The next thing is, what are my upgrade paths? Well, if I'm going to 7.5, I can either be at 7.3 or 7.4. If I'm going to 7.6, I really can only be at 7.4, 7.5. Now, does it mean I can't upgrade from 7.3 to 7.6? I'm going to say you can if you're very good and know what you're doing. It's not a supported upgrade. Doesn't mean I've not done them, but they can be done. But usually when you get into this, you have issues like, well, I can't have a version of Java that's compatible between 7.3 and 7.6. So that's what my problems are going to be. That's why it's only 7.4, 7.5 that go to 7.6. And we'll see that as the Java versions start changing and WebSphere changes and all these other dependencies that we have to understand to have a successful upgrade. So oh, here's that chart I was looking at. It actually, V4R5 we were talking about actually was announced May 22nd, 2000. So that's 25 years ago. 2000, that this customer called me up on and was asking me about, and even 5.4. 5.4 came out 19 years ago. People are still running it.
And they probably
It's
never
amazing.
IPL'd those systems, Pete.
Probably not. And I'd almost be scared to IPL them.
By the way, you keep talking about books. Do people actually get books, or are you
I use the
talking
term.
PDFs?
I use the term books in that vernacular of it's an online PDF.
Okay. Well, I use the word
You are
pager the other
downloading a
day,
PDF.
so you're allowed to do that.
Yeah. Although I have people who do print them because they tell me it's easier to scan through the book when it's printed than it is when it's on the computer. Okay.
Sure.
Whatever everybody's comfortable with. I personally find, I guess it's because I'm getting older, it's easier on the computer because the font is easier to read and the screen's backlit. So I guess it's what you're comfortable with. All right. So we talked about this. If we're going to skip a release from 7.4 to 7.6, we must go to read the 7.5 memo to users as well as the 7.6 memo to users. Let's talk a little bit about HMCs, FSPs, EBMCs, IBMI. So many times people say, hey, I'm upgrading my system and I get from 7.4 to 7.6, I got to upgrade my HMC. And I look at them and I say, that's totally not true, but tell me why you think that. There is a dependency between the level of, depending on your generation of machine, FSP, newer machines have EBMCs, what firmware they run, and the release of the OS, and there's a compatibility between the HMC and the firmware, but the HMC has really nothing to do with the level of OS that you're running. So don't say that. Just understand the compatibility, and we'll go through this chart in a second. It's just and if you don't have an HMC, yeah, you don't have to worry about it, but you still have an FSP or an EBMC, and that's where the firmware runs on the machine, and that's what does the allocation of processor, memory, cards to each partition. So let's get a little more into that. So if we had these things and we had to upgrade, we always upgrade from the outside in. So we would upgrade the HMC first, then the firmware, then IBMI. And I'm going to take you through a couple of scenarios where you'll understand why you do it this way. Let's just kind of go through. This is minimum firmware requirements. Now, I can tell you that if I'm going to 7.6, right now, the only POX that supports 7.6 is a Power 10. Soon, there's going to be another machine. Now, we have Power 8, we have Power 9, we have Power 10, right? What would be the next machine that you think would be on the list would be a Power 11. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that they spent $1 billion on Power 11 chips, which are announced, that the next server would be a Power 11. So when that comes out, 7.6 will support a Power 11, and there'll be a minimum level of firmware. Just note that I'm not saying you should be on a Power 10, ML1020. You probably want to be on ML1060, but this is the minimum that it's supported, and you want to check that beforehand. Now, I talked about that compatibility. let's look at this chart. This is a standard Power 9 and 41B. And so this column here is my HMC version, and this column here is the system firmware that runs on the, in this case, the EBMC, which some people call it FSP. That's fine. So let's say I was running this version 10R1 modification 1020, and I was running one of these versions of software or firmware here, right? The intersection is a supported box. I can't upgrade my firmware from 1020 to 1060 because if I did, my box would be here, and that's an unsupported version. So what I would first do is take my HMC and upgrade it from 10R1 to 10R3, and that would put me in this box here. And then I could upgrade my firmware from 1020 to 1060, and that would put me in that box there. So there's a combination like this for each machine: Power 10, Power 9, Power 8. This is what firmware it runs on. So I put these charts in there more for reference than anything else, so you can see that. But the important thing is HMC's upgrade first, then firmware, then the OS. Now, sometimes you can't just upgrade your HMC from one version to another because there may be nothing that's supported because you waited too long. Firmware, HMCs, if you upgrade them once a year, you're probably fine. My recommendation is about every 9 months, but once a year was good, and that would make sure you're always up to the latest. And if you do have to do an upgrade, it's a simple upgrade. You're not upgrading from something way back to a new active. Now, that's the firmware. Now, let's look at this screen for a second, because while this doesn't have anything to do with the OS upgrade, it could if we had to upgrade our firmware. Now, there's this thing called an update access key. And as long as you have IBM maintenance and it's current and paid for, your update access key will be renewed. This is an expired key. I keep this screen because I want to show you an expired key. I cannot put any firmware, system firmware on this machine, which is the EBMC firmware, because it's a Power 9. I can see it's a Power 9 because the last 2 digits of 57339XX. If the XX is 09, it's a Power 9. If it's a Power 10, it would be 10. If it's a Power 8, it would be 08, right? So I couldn't put a newer version on, because this is expired 3 years ago. I could put a version on that was newer, that was older than 03, 27, 22, but I can't put any version that came out after that. It just won't let me. So just things to know. Now, the next screen we have one that is valid till 2028. So we can put any update of firmware on that, and that is a Power 10. We can see because it's 910. So just something to understand and make sure, because we're going to have to upgrade this as part of our total upgrade. And we could just use the display firmware status command to find this out. Now, let's talk a little bit about models. You can see the Power 10, or you can see 7.6 right now only runs on Power 10. Now, if IBM is anything, they're consistent. Look at the symmetry in the chart. And you can see that when the next version of Power, we'd call it a Power 11, I guess, comes out, it is going to run probably 7.5 and 7.6. Because, like I said, IBM's just consistent based on when things come out and whatnot. Will it run 7.4? I don't know. I can't remember if it will run 7.4 or not. But you see this consistency chart, and you could see, how 7.6, 7.5 ran only on Power 10 and Power 9. 7.6 right now only runs on the latest version of the hardware. When the next version is announced, it will run on that. So important to understand if I have a power 8 and I love my power 8 and I'm on 7.4, I ain't going any further, right? If I have a power 9, I'm not going any further, right? That power 9 is now starting to get old, and it's, could be 6 years old. It's maybe time to replace it. So these are the things that we analyze as we're doing our upgrade, because we don't want to start doing an upgrade and realize, well, we're not going anywhere. This is the same chart, just taken from a picture into words. So let's talk about some issues. I'm going to skip some of these older charts. They're in the handout. I want to talk more about what the newer releases don't support. So we'll start with 7.4. So 7.4 doesn't support power 7. We have to increase the license internal code area. So there's a space on the load source that the license internal code goes into. It's bigger with each release. Some releases we have to increase it, right? So in going to 7.4, you have to do that. Just go like Pig'em, take option 5, take the second from the last option at the bottom, boom, and that's how you increase it. There's going to be required PTFs. We'll talk about what those are. Your console is only going to be ACS at this point, or HMC. That's it. There's no ops console that is the old modem kind of console that doesn't support anymore, right? There's no twin so we need to be understanding of where our console is. And I always say you go to the latest version of ACS before the upgrade. Secure sockets and TLS, right? They've enabled 1.3. Well, that's great for 7.4. They've disabled 1.1 and 1.0. Okay, that's good because those were deemed unsecured. When they say they disabled it, you could re-enable it if you needed to. I wouldn't recommend anybody do that. You have to go into DST, and there's a way to do it. SSL 2.0 can't even be turned on. So if you're running 1.0 of TLS and you have a partner that you're talking to, you're going to have to make sure that partner gets either on 1.2 or 1.3 before the upgrade. So these are why we plan, right? Net server shares, SMB version 3 is going to be the default. And now supported versions of Java is going to be Java 8, 11, 17, Domino, WebSphere. You see the same type things. I'm going to 7.5 now. Same kind of issues, right? We have a lot of people on 7.4 in this webinar. Some of you can maybe go to 7.5, some go to 7.6. People say to me, which version should I go to? Well, if you ask IBM, they're always going to say, well, you got to go to the latest and greatest, got to go to 7.6. Whoa, not so fast. My version is go to the highest that you can. Go to the highest that your applications support, your third-party product support, your hardware supports, right? That's the right choice. You can't make that choice without understanding everything that's running on your box, because the choice for each person on this webinar is different, because you have different software, you have different hardware, you have different third-party applications, third-party products that you need to address. Okay, so we know 7.5 is no Power 8. Right? Power 8 is getting pretty old at this point in time. If I'm coming from 7.4, I don't need to increase the license internal code, only if I'm coming from 7.3. Again, we'll talk about some PTFs. ACS and HMC is my console, but look at this. There's no more 11111 or 22222. They've removed them from a security perspective. Excellent. But if that's what I'm using to connect to my console, I need to make sure I change that beforehand, create another ID so that I'm not using those. SSL, TLS, no changes there. Supported versions of Java, WebSphere, Domino, MQ, they've changed. So we need to make sure we're at least at those versions beforehand. As we talk about 7.6, because we're staying at 7.6, I put a little more detail into here. No Power 9. We need to increase the license internal code if we're coming from 7.3, right? Required PTFs. There's changes to the date range if you're using a 2-digit floating date, right? And you need to be aware of what those changes are, because that floating date range has changed. So you'll need to know that. Obviously, we still have the LAN console issue. We've enabled TLS 1.3. But here's a big one. If I'm using EMC disk and I have bought it recently, I may have a problem. I need to go out, get IBM and pay for a driver beforehand. So it's not supported unless you have the key. So ensure that you have the key. If your disk drives, you do a work disk status and they show up as D910s, stop. Do not proceed unless you can ensure that you have that key and you have the support for that. And you want to make sure you change the default DST password for QSEC offer before the upgrade. Because why are we doing these things? We want to address the issues before we start. I always make an analogy. If I'm making sausage, I can't turn the sausage grinder backwards and get pigs. Okay. Once I've committed to that sausage and I'm rolling it out, we're committed. Once we've done the upgrade, and if I'm on an old version of Java, I can't go backwards. I can't install an old version. I can't go back. I'd have to restore my system from my save if my programs didn't work or I couldn't upgrade to a newer version of Java. So these are kind of issues. Talk a little bit more. Now, it's funny, I was just in Common Europe over in Sweden and talking to the folks there, and I had a lot of people who were Swedish, who were Polish, who were Norwegian, right? They had issues with IBM ICE operating systems, and LPPs no longer supported these languages. So they're going to have to address this before they do the upgrade. Will they change to another language? I don't know what they'll do. But they're going to have to address it because IBM's no longer supporting those languages. There's 4 new user-supplied programs that were created. I'm just trying to find my damn cursor. I got to slow it down for a second. Okay. 4 new user-supplied profiles, and IBM, and the NC means no change. You can't change these profiles. And now the IBM users or the IBM jobs that are submitted on those QSEC offer or Q user profiles will now be submitted with those profiles because they're new and they have the same privileges as their counterparts, but you need to make sure you're aware of these. Journal standby state on the change journal command will be removed in a future release. So if you're using that, address it now. Bisync, layer 2 tunneling protocol and point-to-point has been removed, right? We don't have any more modems. We don't have that capability of using it. So they've been removed from the system. Notice supported versions of Java 8.19, the default is 17, and Java 21 is just about ready. It may actually be ready by the end of this month to be shipped as part of the release. It won't ship as part of the system that you get. You'll probably have to go back and install it afterwards because it's not ready at GA.
And Pete,
WebSphere.
If I can jump in, that's the level that we're going to with Go Anywhere is Java 21. Okay. So we're waiting on that, and then we have to incorporate it too. So there's a couple of things floating there.
Yep. So I mean, it's bit you, and it's going to bit other people as well. This is why when we're doing our prep work, we do a work JVM job. Work JVM job, and we put a 5 next to each job, and we see what versions of Java we're truly running. Because some people say, well, I just do a go lick pig'em and I take option 10 and I see what versions of Java are installed. Yes, that's what's installed, not what you're using, right? So you want to make sure, because you could have older versions of Java if you're at 7.4 and you're not running on them. So by doing a work JVM job, putting a 5 there, we will see exactly what versions we're using. And if we're using Java 8 on all our programs, then we have nothing to worry about because Java 8 is going to be at 7.6, right? When we get to the next release, it's going to be quite interesting because Java 8's been around for a while. and it won't be at the next release of IBMI because it won't be supported anymore. WebSphere, you got to make sure you adjust as well. Okay, and SMB, right? So SMB is your file shares. This is what Windows used to do a file share, and a lot of people are still on SMB1, which is really old. SMB2 is really where you want to be. SM3, SMB version 3 is even better. It's 7.4, 7.5, 7.6. Oh, I'm missing a slide on here. And I've taken some customers from SMB version 1 to version 2, and they actually had some Excel programs. Then they were trying to open them on a shared drive. It was taking 45 seconds to open the Excel file. We just switched from 1 to 2, and it went from 45 seconds to 2 seconds. That's all we did. We didn't change anything else. And their network people were so happy because they got on a better release. So you may want to check that. How do you check that? You can call this program down here. This will tell you what version you're on. You want to look at this program because you can actually also change the default version as well if you need to. So something good to there. This is just an eye chart on WebSphere compatibility. Protocol compatibility by OS is out here. Domino compatibility. We do some Mimics work, so I have my Mimic stuff in here. Now, load source. Load source has to be 35 gig or more, which means there's no physical disk drives that are 35 gigs anymore. So you don't have to worry about that. But if you're doing NVMe, you could make a NVMe storage space smaller than 35. You wouldn't want to, but you could. So you got to be aware of that when you're going. If you're doing IBMI hosting IBMI, if you're doing VIOS hosting it, if you're having external a SAN, if you're doing BIOS, doing NDisks, HDisks rather, you're going to come into this problem. You want to make sure it's big enough. Why does it have to be bigger than 35 gig? Because 35 gig, when we increase the size of the load source, it needs a lot of space on that load source. So that's why this is really important. Now, if you're doing any kind of hosting, IBMI hosting, VIOS hosting, remember that the standard size disk page is 512 bytes, right, per sector. IBMI uses 520 byte sectors. You can't get 520 into 512. So what IBM does is it creates 8 512 byte standard sectors, and into that it puts 7 pages of 520 byte sectors into it. So there's some waste in it. But what I want to make sure you understand is when you're creating your disks, don't create a 35 gig drive, because by the time it gets to IBMI, if you're doing virtualization, it will be smaller than 35 gig. So create one that's at least 40 gig and you'll never have a problem. Because when it creates it, it will be seen as a 35 gig drive. All right, operations console. Really what I want to say is upgrade the operations console before you do the OS upgrade, so you have the latest version of ACS out there. And this is just some other things about what's not supported. All right, let's talk about 7.4. We can see what's not supported, right? So if I'm running WAS 8.0, I'd have to upgrade to 8.5, FixPax 15 or higher, right? Same thing. If I'm upgrading to version 9, I have a version FixPack 11 that I got to be aware of. So, if I'm running Java 7, not supported it's on any longer. So let's talk about going to 7.5, right? Because most of the people are on 7.4, 7.5. If I'm making this upgrade, what do I have to do? My WAS server again needs to upgrade, but this time to a higher FixPack 11. My MQ has to be upgraded. Java 7 to Java 8, right? So things that we just need to be aware of. And again, it's the same thing if we're running WebSphere 7.6. Now, be aware that Installation Manager only works at 1.9. 1.10 does not work. And if you're running 7.6, you have to, and you've upgraded to 1.10, you'll have to downgrade Installation Manager to 1.9 before you upgrade your WebSphere. So again, things to understand and know. DB2 Web Query, no longer on the system. IBM fax support, no longer on the system. So if you're doing faxing, right, you may need to relook at and get a third-party fax application because Fax 400 is no longer there. BRMS, BRMS, we need to install BRMS BR1 PTFs because, and make sure you understand what I'm saying, BR1 is not supported at 7.6. BR2 is supported at 7.6. So if and I can't have BR1 and BR2 on the machine at the same time. So what I have to do is I have to install these PTFs. If I'm on 7.5 or 7.4, if I'm running BRMS, I have to make sure there's no logical files, user-created logical files, over the BRMS files in QUser BRM. I need to remove any SQL services to prevent dependency issues when I'm switching from BR1 to BR2, and I can do that with this call right here. And then I delete BR1, the product, that note that QUser BRM is not deleted, and then I can install BR2, have the license keys, and do that. But this is a quick, how do you do it? There's some more details that need to be involved, but these are the kind of things that I say planning makes a difference. Because we just don't say, I got nothing to do this weekend. Let's upgrade the system. No, that's not going to work, right? We have to plan. We have to make sure. And this, I'm not going to go through each one of these. This is what's 7.5 was the last release to support DHCP, DNS, right? All these things. There's 3 pages of this. These are no longer part of the system. So if you're using them, and I've called out a few of them, not all of them, you need to be aware of this before you do the upgrade. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about PTFs, planning. This, I'm going to show you the PTFs, but where did I get them from? You know, if I went to 7.6, I just put my cursor on this, and you can actually go to 7.6, and these support pages are the required PTFs to go to 7.6. I kind of liked it when they did informational APARs because I could just Google search that APAR. I didn't have to put this long URL in, but the URLs are out there. The other thing we want to do is look at the preventive service and planning. When a new release comes out, quite often they find problems. So I would say 7.6 is extremely stable right now. We've had no problems with it, but I get the latest release, I put the PTFs on, and I'm doing fine on my systems that are running 7.6. Now, remember I told you I did an upgrade in an hour and 50 minutes? Part of the reason I did that was what's called the resaves or respins. They used to be called respins. Now they're really called resaves. So let's take 7.4 for instance. I don't even know what letter in the alphabet P is, but I'm going to say it's 20. So you see the red letter there, RSA. A is the first letter of 7.6, so it's the first release. F is the 6th release. So if I was going to upgrade from 7.4 to 7.5, I'd want to make sure when I downloaded from IBM the latest release, because F already has TR5 already installed on it. So when I'm doing the upgrade, I already got so many lick PTFs already resaved and put on there. So to make sure we all understand this, IBM comes out with the first version of a release. They call it A. A whole bunch of PTFs come out, a new TR comes out, they resave it. All those PTFs are now included on it, and we now have version B, right? 6 months later, another TR comes out, they resave that again, and now I have version C. You can see as the letters get higher, we have more and more PTFs. That means A, I don't have to install those PTFs. I still have to do PTF processing after the upgrade, but I already have a lot of them installed on my system. makes my upgrade so much simpler. My TR's there. I may not have to do multiple IPLs. And then if the dash on the OS changes, they've resaved the OS itself, and you want to get that. That's why I was saying before, when it comes time to download the software, we want to do it pretty close to when we're going to do the upgrade. So if we were upgrading in July, I'd have no problem downloading the software now, right? But if we were upgrading in November, I'd probably wait till October, end of October, because IBM, again, nothing but consistent. They usually have a TR in the spring and the fall, and then I'd be able to make sure that TR is already installed on the iBase DVD that I'm loading my images from. So that's the big thing about resaves. Now, license keys no longer come, so we're going to go to the ESS website. We're going to sign in with your ID, not mine. I like you guys, but I don't like you that much. So we're going to go out and go down, sign in, and get all our keys. Now, the instructions say to download your keys and install them after the upgrade. I haven't done that in probably 30 years. I always install them before the upgrade. Do you ever look at the message that says key not found? It says, put help on it. It says, I went to the repository and I didn't find a key. So I thought, So the next upgrade I did, I downloaded all the keys beforehand. Everything worked fine. And then I never got a key message. When that happens, I know when I see a key message, I have a problem because I've preloaded all my keys. So that's what I want you to think about. And I can download my keys from my PC into my machine. So what I do is I sign into the IBM website. I run a little Java app on my PC that connects to my IBM I partition, and it reads the key records from IBM and transfers them and does an add license key automatically after I sign on to my system. And now all my keys are downloaded. Makes it much easier, no problems. And now my keys are in and ready. And when I do the upgrade, it will find the key in the repository. Otherwise, I have to enter all these keys, and that's a pain in the neck. All right, image catalogs. I love image catalogs. See how we're doing on time. Good. Okay. And if I'm upgrading from any of these releases, I need to put these PTFs in. Where did I find that? Remember that sheet that I talked about that I told you the link for required PTFs? That's where I found them. So if I'm upgrading from 7.4 to 7.6, I'm going to put in these 8 PTFs here, or 7 PTFs, to make sure I don't have a problem, right? So let's start our preparation. This is our menu we're going to go. We do a go lick pig 'em. We take 5, and we're going to use this menu and for the next couple of times. We're not doing the upgrade yet. We're still doing the preparation. Remember I said we're going to allocate space for additional space for the license internal code. That's the first thing I do. In fact, you could do this today. And it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter if I'm upgrading today, tomorrow, in January of 2026. At least this way I'm ready and I have the space available. Especially for some people who don't IPL that often, I recommend getting this done soon. I do need to make sure that if I'm coming from any of these releases, I put these PTFs on first. One, so it knows what 7.6 is, and it increases the license code to the right amount of space. So that when I come here and take that option, if I put in V7 R6 M0 and it highlights and says, I don't know what that version is, then I know I don't have the right level of PTFs on. But make sure you have those PTFs on beforehand, and you won't have a problem. It'll be simple as cake. Now, at this point, we permanently apply our PTFs. It saves space. Now, we can't have any PTFs ready for apply during the upgrade. So we do have to permanently apply them and then IPL the system. So put that into your process. You're going to need another IPL at that point. I want to document these system values. I want to know what they are. One, I want to know, hey, QSys libel, what values are in it? One, I want to know, do you have a library in front of QSys? If you do, why? And that's fine if you do, but I want to look at the objects in there, because those objects are going to be called beforehand. Now, a lot of times people will put a command in and change a parameter. No problem. We need to know what that is so that we can do that again, take the 7.6 command out of QSys and make that same change to it, or whatever you've done. I want to know what's in Q user library list. I want to make sure that allow object restore is set to star all. I want to make sure that Q verify object restore is set to a maximum of a 3, preferably a 1. I want to look at the startup program. I want to know, hey, is this program in QSys called Q startup? Because if it is, it's going to get overwritten when we do the OS upgrade, and none of your subsystems are going to start. That's a problem. So if I do see it in QSys, one, I want to move it. I want to see what's in there. I also want to look at, it's a good time to look at your startup program, because I want to make sure you're starting Q user work. I want to make sure you're starting TCP before you start the remote writers, right? There's dependencies, and I want to make sure they're in there and done properly. And I want to do Q scan file control, make sure it says no post restore, right? So I write these down if I've had to change them, because I will want to change them back after the upgrade. Back to this menu, I verify system objects and user profiles. User profiles is always usually pretty easy. It makes sure the profiles for the upgrade are there. The cross-reference files. If this comes back in error when I check this, I have to run a reclaim storage star database cross-reference, or star dbxref. And because it's going to reorg those cross-reference files, I have to be in dedicated mode to run that, or restricted mode. So if it comes back with a 303 error, you're going to have to address that. We want to make sure that QSecOffer does not have a secondary language. All IBM libraries are in the system AS, and I want to check to see if you have secondary languages. Because if you do have secondary languages, I need to make sure I have those secondary languages for the release that we're going to. Otherwise, we're going to have a language issue for people who've changed to a different language. I want to make sure that compress my job tables are set to none. Otherwise, I will stall at C900 to A5. I don't want to do that. I also want to arrange my media at this point in time. If I'm talking about DVDs, I'm going to arrange them in this order: DVDs or images. If I'm doing image catalogs, I'm going to make sure I have these PTFs installed. And then I'm going to create my image catalog. Now, I'll create my image catalog first, and then I'm going to add the images to it. But before I do that, I need to make sure, do I have enough space for an image catalog installation? Again, this is looking at the load source, because the load source, the image catalog, is going to get expanded on the load source when we do a demode IPL, and you're going to see this with the SRC codes. I'll show you the SRC codes in a couple of screens, but you want to run this SST macro. Make sure you have these PTFs on first, and it should say successful space, or if you don't have enough space, it'll give you an error. So you need at least 2.5 gigabytes on the load source to be able to do this. So I create my virtual optical. I'm going to, for each DVD, we're going to do this screen as star gen, but if we have the images that we've downloaded, we're just going to do not star gen. We're going to do the from file, so that we can not have two sets of images on there. And then that will just take the image from where it is and load it into the image catalog. Now, I've done that for all my images, whether it's a DVD or whether I've downloaded them. I'm going to put them all in. Notice they all say loaded, but the image catalog is not ready. We don't have a device yet. So we'll do an F6, add the optvert 01 rather, and now you can see that I do have a virtual image catalog, and I'm ready to do the upgrade. What if I do a work op file, what's ever in mounted is what will show up in the optvrt01. And from here, I'm going to run through the menu to make sure we have all the programs. So the first thing we're going to do, again from our Golic Pigam menu, option 5, we're going to take the first option here, which is work with licensed programs, and we're going to, for the release that we're going on to, we're going to read what's in the optical device, which is associated with the image catalog, and it's going to look and say, do I have an image for every release, for every LPP that I have on my system? Or is there an LPP that doesn't get supported, right? And it's going to build basically a list. And when we run this, it takes a couple minutes, it will automatically put a 1 next to anything that's currently running on your system and has an upgrade path to it. So it put the ones there, and then we'll just kind of go through. We can look at this. I always, if I want to add a second one, I can do that as well. I can do an F11, look for additional storage, or F11, see the expected release, see the expected action next. So you just toggle that through there. You can also see how much bigger the release is going to be. It's another 2 gigabytes in size bigger from, in this case, this was going from 7.4 to 7.5. So again, we go back to this menu. We want to see programs that need to be deleted. Well, hopefully this is empty, but it may not be. Or we want to see software not found. Now, this could mean I didn't put a DVD into the image catalog, or it could mean I don't have a version for a LPP, and IBMI knows that there should be a replacement version. So we'll say, hey, there's no software that I found for the upgrade for this particular product. So we would have to address that. You can also go back and modify that target release and add additional things that may not be there. Maybe different versions of Java I want to add. Whatever it is, you can do that. Now, the next thing we're going to do is licenses. Notice all my licenses say no. We got to change those to yeses. So we're going to put a 5 next to each one of these, and I never read them. IBM's got more lawyers than Carter's got pills. So what I'm going to do is just accept them all, and then I come back to the screen. They'll all say yes. Notice there's a more. I need a page down. Make sure everyone says yes. Otherwise, it won't automatically install, and that's a problem. I can estimate how much additional storage I need. Most systems have enough storage, so this is really not a case. This is just kind of left over from old upgrades, basically, but it's a step that's needed to be done. It says, yes, this will multi-install because I have enough space. I want to, at this point, check my console type, so I go into DST or SST, and I look at my system tools and devices. I look for my console, and my console either should be a 3 or a 4, because those are the only things that's supported at this point in time. If I'm on an old release, like 5.4, and I'm crossing the 6.1 boundary, I do have to worry about analyze object convert. I'm really not going to talk about that. Right before the upgrade, I need to make sure that two-phase commit there is nothing in two-phase commit or resync. So I run this command and it tells me nothing. If I have a job in there, I got to resolve that before the upgrade. And now I'm just about ready to do the upgrade. But my most important step, I either need to do a full save 21 or a BRMS save, whatever I use. But if I have to recover the system, I don't want to go back to the backup that you did in April, and then the key user sys you did in May, the IFS you did the beginning of June, but every night you do that'd be a pain in the ass, right? Now, maybe if you had BRMS, that's a different story, but a full system save required before the upgrade. Now, I want to verify my image catalog, so I'm going to verify it. The first one's going to come up as failed because I didn't have something correct. I would put my cursor on that and resolve it. It should come up as good, and that means, hey, yeah, it's verified. Everything's good for the upgrade. Means I have load source space. I've accepted my license agreements. It doesn't check everything. It doesn't mean once it's verified, you're good to go. It just means that 3 or 4 things have been verified. That's why I like to also use the pre-upgrade verification tool, because it will verify a couple of things. But again, it doesn't verify everything. It's not checking if I have the right space on the load source, if I can expand the image catalog. It doesn't check those kinds of things. So, some people say, oh, I use that and that's all I use. Well, I say, well, you're wrong. You really need to understand what you're doing. That is a tool. That is not the upgrade. It's a tool for the upgrade. Now, the actual upgrade. This is the upgrade, right? Power down sys, restart, yes. point it to my image catalog, and I'm off to go. It confirms it. It actually verifies the image catalog yet again. Then it confirms it with an F16. And now we sit back and we watch the image catalog expand. You will see on your SRC, on your bezel, or on your HMC, whichever you have, you'll see C65 and then XX and 41 Charlie Charlie. The XX, in this case it's 54% through, will go from 00 to 99. When it's at 99, it will then change over to 41 dog dog, and that's expanding the license internal code and loading the lick. Once at this point, we're going to load the license internal code. You'll see that screen first. Then it will start loading the OS. Option 2 takes the longest to load. And then once that's done, we'll start loading the LPPs. Now, you never want to see 2 lines up here because that means something failed. And then that's it. We're done with the upgrade. Now we need to verify. So I'd like to do a go lick pig'em, take option 50. Here's everything looks good here. Oh, I have a license key not found. What key was that? I need to address that. I also look to make sure it says license installation process completed successfully. Sometimes it says, no, it didn't complete successfully. That's okay. Let's find out why. Let's fix the problem at this point. It's going to take a little detective work. We may need to look for job logs and QLP install. Most of the time it's in here. I also look at QSysOpper. I want to see if any messages are there. I've read my cover letters, so I know if I have any special PTFs that I need to apply first. Sometimes there's PTFs for the PTF process. Right now in 7.6, there aren't any of that. But that's again why I read the cover letter that comes with the QM package, and I read the PSP instructions so I know about that. If everything's good, I just load all the PTFs into an image catalog, the groups, the QM, the technology refresh, and IPL, and I won't have a problem. Could have multiple IPLs. We'll see it applying PTFs. And then after the first IPL, we want to make sure INZ successfully starts and finishes. If it doesn't start, you can always run it manually. Sometimes I run it before I even IPL. I think it's the worst named command because it sounds like it's going to initialize my system like format C, but it really doesn't do that. It initializes files in QUseAssist. And we want to make sure we get that completed successfully. At that point in time, we need to do some stuff afterwards. We want to update the system values that we changed. We had them written down. If we're using client access for the web, we'd have to update that again. We want to make sure a service director is enabled and working. I want to make sure that GoPM agent is actually, I do a GoPM agent, make sure it's up and running. I look at my performance data, make sure that got converted and moved to the new release. I don't necessarily delete my image catalogs right away. I usually leave them for a couple of weeks just in case I need to do anything else in there. I do a send PTF order or a send service request just to make sure that those functions still work. Doesn't hurt to be safe, because if something goes wrong, I want that call to IBM. I clean up my PTF work groups from the old ones, and I update any access clients. Now, you don't have to necessarily update the clients because those will work with a newer release. I always upgrade the LAN console version of ACS before my upgrade. And if you do have any integrated Windows servers, 7.6 would be 7.5 would be the last version. You would have to upgrade that software on there. And then if I'm going from 6 across the 6-run boundary, I have to re-encapsulate all my programs. If I'm going to 7.3 or 7.5, 7 V5R4 or 7.3, these objects need to be touched. Display object D will work fine. That touches them and the conversion happens. And now I need a new save. At least I need a save 22, which is a save sys, save lib IBM, and the IFS save of these 2 directories, because that's pretty much everything I touched. I prefer to have a full system save if I have the time. So we've covered a lot. And at this point, we have any questions, Tom, that are out there?
We do. And well, why don't you go ahead and move ahead one slide? Or well, maybe people want to see that. Okay, so fair enough. That's Pete's contact information. I'm gonna launch up a polling question here too, and then I'll bring in some of the questions. So we just want to know if there's some things you want from Fortra. Feel free to select as many of these as you want. We continue to do free security scans. Highly recommend that if you have security on your mind with IBMI. It's a great way of finding out what your issues may be, and even especially after you do an upgrade, it's a great time to take a really quick look. Only runs in 2 or 3 minutes on your system, and then we can have a little discussion about that. And then if you want to talk about high availability, or you're getting ready to go to Power 10 or Power 11, we do help do capacity planning services. Of course, we do business intelligence on IBMI. If you're unhappy with what you're getting for support on web query, we can come help you out there. And then, of course, automation and monitoring is what started the company. So go ahead, we'll leave that open a little bit. Pete, one of the questions we had is here, is there a tool where you can enter your power system model, your HMC level, your FSP, your OS levels, and it'll tell you what versions we need to upgrade on each of our items to go to 7.6.
Kind of.
I think you walked through all that, but yeah,
well, yeah.
How would you answer that?
There is a tool called the IBM FLIRT, F-L-I-R-T, and you actually put your power system in your HMC, and it will tell you the latest versions to get to on that. It will always tell you the latest versions to go to. And you put in what version you're currently running, it'll tell you the upgrade path and stuff like that. So yeah, there is that. From an IBMI perspective, there's really not, you know if you're at 7.3 or 7.4, your upgrade paths is, you can go to 7.5, stuff like that. So there's that.
Yeah, okay. So there, we'll get rid of that. And then somebody, Michael has a comment out there. He's written a script to help you convert from BR1 to BR2. So maybe at some point in time. And I also know it's the same Michael Meyer who runs the IBMI reference.blogspot.com. And there's a lot of good information out there. So we'll give him a plug for that. Pete, we're going to be doing this session again tomorrow morning, bright and early, 7 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Central for our colleagues over in Europe or other parts of the world. If you enjoyed this session, which I'm sure you did, feel free to promote it out to your colleagues in other parts of the world. I know IBMI is not just in North America. And then, here you see all the things that Fortra does on IBMI. We're very committed to this platform. If you want to move ahead again, another slide on that, Pete. And just remind you, the State of the IBMI Security Study was done last month, 2 months ago now, end of April. And the 2025 edition's out there. So if you want to see what the concerns are with cybersecurity on IBMI and what your colleagues have for general settings, I think you'll be surprised. We still say that IBMI is more of a system of security by obscurity in a lot of cases, and we still need a lot to do in the cyberspace. So anyways, and I think that's it for content. We did the polling question, and I think we're all done then, right? All right, well, Pete, again, I can't thank you enough on behalf of Fortra and really the IBM community that you're still around. You're still active in all this stuff, yet you're retired, yeah. I guess. So, well, and enjoying life.
I retired from day to day.
But as you said, your daughter's working for Service Express, so you're not fully retired. I have a feeling she reaches out occasionally.
Yeah, I talk to my staff probably once every 6 weeks, just about everybody still.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, I know we got more attendees just on the fact that I sent out a chat about tomorrow's session, so looking forward to that. We'll talk to you in the morning. Have a great rest of the day. Maybe you can get out on that pontoon boat or something like that. Yeah.
I hope so. All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.